financing capacities.
Thank you very much. Well, I mean, I think you've touched on the competition in the space, in the AI space, and I think one of the key reasons for that as well is just the pace of innovation when it comes to AI. So perhaps, Demis, we could come to you and just kind of get your views on how you respond to that pace and touching on some of the points just raised, what we need to be doing to not only keep up, but to get ahead.
Well, it's a very exciting time right now in AI, of course. The pace of progress has been incredible. But it's also a very serious moment. I think we're a very decisive moment. I've been working on AI for 20 plus years now. DeepMind was started more than 15 years ago. Almost nobody was working on AI then. Now the whole world is working on it. And we've always believed that it's going to be the most transformative technology perhaps humanity will ever invent. So how we build it, the decisions we make, the leaders in this field and the governments in this field make now is going to be decisive about how this goes. And I'm very excited about applying AI to science and using it to accelerate scientific discovery in medicine. That's why I spent my whole career working on AI. And we're making great progress on that front. But it's a dual-use technology, and there are risks too. And I think, I'd love to see more dialogue at the international level about agreeing things like minimum standards for how we want these AI systems to work. And I've been saying for a long time, and we've been talking with President Macron for a long time, maybe even 10 years ago now, about if you want to influence how this debate goes on the global scale, you have to also be in the lead technically to have a seat at the table. And I think the UK and France and a few other like-minded countries, perhaps like Canada and Switzerland, I think if we band together with the same values, we can form a counterweight to the two global superpowers and influence the debate at the global stage. And I think that's very important to have that voice, given that this technology is going to affect everyone in the world.
Thank you very much. Arthur, if I could come to you on a similar point again, addressing this idea that the pace of innovation is something that is both a challenge and an opportunity, and how you at Mistral AI think about that and respond to that.
Well, one of the premises of starting Mistral AI has been to commit to open science and bring open source models to the world. And it's interesting to note that we actually started the company as a French and British company, as we incorporated the two companies almost at the same time. We had a workforce here very quickly. And to Demis' points, we need, as countries, to have a seat at the table to innovate. If you don't innovate, you're down to regulating, and then it's a little less interesting, and you have less of a say in how we use the technology. And so our approach there is to leverage the power of the two countries when it comes to training people and to have great scientists. And by committing to the open technology and building a business on top, building an enterprise business on top, we've been able to, I think, accelerate and change a bit the way the field were thinking about this issue of having enough transparency around the models, having enough access, ability to change them. And what we see is that with the models that we've released, starting in 2023, the academic world has been able to use them quite extensively. Actually, we've never had as much citations as with Mistral 7B, which is the first model we released. And the reason for that is that it's sufficiently small for scientists working in university to work on them and to do studies. And so we found that by committing to open source and by doing it more than what the US can do, the US is always a bit struggling whether they should do it or not because they have this competition with China, which we have a little less. By committing to this open technology, we've been able to spread science and to have a lot of new scientists work on that technology, and sometimes they came to us and started to work with us.
Thank you very much. I think the open source debate is going to continue and be an important policy area that we're going to need to balance. I think we've talked about the need for science and really allowing science to innovate and talking about how AI itself can help with that. I think the next question is, how do we get some of these great breakthroughs to market? So how do we have science for growth? Mr. President, perhaps you could say something about how France is approaching some of these challenges about translating these great breakthroughs from science, from the lab, and getting them to market.
I mean, it's been our key challenges for decades, I would say. And historically, we were not the best in class, to be totally transparent with you. And during many years, we had this feature to be quite good in some key fundamental science, or quite good in our in Polytechnic, in RIA, CNRS, and challenged by some others in terms of tech transfer. I think during the past 2 to 3 decades, we did improve our ecosystem by creating the flexibilities and the facilities in order to improve the tech transfer, to fix the IP regulations, and to create flexibilities for researchers and so on. And for me, it's, as always, a question of ecosystem and role model. And the question is, as long as in your labs, in your universities, you are just surrounded by people being 100% in academics, you don't have incentives or role model which will create incentive precisely to bring your innovation to the market. Now the situation is totally different. So we passed laws, changed our regulations, I would say at the beginning of the century. But during the past decade, there is a big transformation. And thanks to the French tech, I have some of the French tech people here, but we launched this brand 10 years ago now. And we have this ecosystem not just in France, but everywhere in the world. And it's very inspiring, I would say. And some of the French tech people are not coming from universities. Some are not coming from a big disruption, but some are coming from fundamental research. But it creates an ecosystem and some role models, and it creates a lot of incentives for people, for young people, students, PhD, postdocs, precisely to try to see how they can bring their research in the market in order to get precisely scale and pace. And I think it's, for me, as policymakers, what we have to do is to create the maximum level of flexibilities. So we have to allow those who want to stay and be involved in fundamental research to stay and to be competitive. And this is where we are working very hard because we are improving the model and we will pass additional stuff in order to be more competitive, in order to keep our talents on fundamental research and universities as well. But we have to create flexibilities to allow them who want precisely to exit in a certain way or launch a startup or launch a contract with the private sector to transform what is fundamental research in an innovation, a company, and I hope tomorrow a large company. So we did improve the ecosystem. We are still improving it. My second point is clearly about financing. I already mentioned it, but I think this is a game changer. And this is why what was done during the past few years with QTI and some others, because we had private financiers launching precisely some additional scale. We had this TB fund, and we tried to accelerate the funding in innovation is as well critical.
I was going to come to you next, Demis, to sort of say, what, as a world-leading deep tech founder, what do you think are still the big challenges, the big hurdles that we need to get out of the way to allow innovation to really flourish?
Well, look, I think the good news is we have, you know, the UK and France specifically, but also in the EU, is we have world-class talent and world-class universities like Imperial, like where we're here. So the talent's always been here, and I've always been a big believer in that. Part of the issue is the ecosystem, as the Mr. President says, and that's getting better. So access to capital, like 15 years ago, was very difficult to start up any deep tech company here. But we've had some proven successes now, and DeepMind's been part of that. And I think that part's got better. What we need is really grand ambitions. People are really ambitious, like Arthur, to go for it. And we've shown that it's possible. And I think there's sort of, this was a lack of role models maybe 20 years ago. Now we have some, and increasingly the next generation as well. And we're very proud of Arthur's success as ex-DeepMind person and a prodigy of ours. And, you know, I think that it just takes a few success stories to start building an ecosystem. That's how Silicon Valley started. And then you reinvest, those entrepreneurs mentor others and reinvest, and you get a critical mass. And I think now Paris and London especially have that critical mass. And